the land, the guild, Ladies Guild, started fundraising, and they were able to save enough to buy the first block, which was on the corner. And then following that, Mr. Milner, who was a real estate agent, donated a block to them. So, and they were quite large blocks, so the church had quite a large area on this corner of the Flora Terrace.
When the original church building was erected in 1938, it cost £588 and had a debt of £258. Later it was fully lined and a platform added, plus a small vestry and entrance porch. As well as all the additional furnishings, the church had 2 organs and a piano. The church building and hall at the corner of Flora Terrace and Margaret Street were demolished in 1975 to make way for Euroka Village, which extends along Flora Terrace to Ada Street. The establishment of the village was made possible by the availability of a substantial grant of finance from the government. And then I like the bit where it says that Mrs. Barclay, the wife of Reverend Barclay, and like all ceremonies, there had to be a lighter side to the occasion when the door would not open. When manual strength was applied, the whole door fell flat in the aisle, but this did not prevent the people attending the first service to be held at Waterman's Bay Methodist Church.
Well, Mrs. Booth was the instigator of all those services, which were held in private homes in the area, and then she seemed to be the mover of the ladies, starting the Ladies Guild and Sunday School, and all these things seemed to be started by Mrs. Booth. Reverend Fennell was the minister of the Methodist Church in Charles Street, West Perth, and he helped quite a lot here, and he was the instigator of the starting of the Sunday School. And 2 ladies, Miss Lapthorne and a Mrs. Ould, O-U-L-D, Ould, I think he would pronounce it. I think he was responsible for them coming out and starting the actual Sunday school.
My grandmother lived in Margaret Street, and so I came here to Sunday school and gave them a little bit of peace in Margaret Street in the afternoon. But we were Church of England, and my grandmother was against me coming to a Methodist church. I remember, but it was lovely. It was just this little tiny church, and I loved it. And I had a lovely little book with little stamps in it. And unfortunately, it got lost, and I was quite upset about that. We had a story, and then we would do drawing with coloured chalk, coloured waxy chalk. So it wasn't a chalk, it was like a wax. But we did that, and then we would get a stamp on our hand and a stamp in the little book that we had. And I thought that was great. But I loved Mrs. Booth, and she was a plump lady, and she was always dressed in black. I suppose we spent every weekend more or less in the surf club, and then we did have our weekly dances, and then Georgie James, which was Mr. James's son, he used to drive a bus, and he would take the people home. People would come from Osborne Park and Scarborough, different places, and so the bus just took everybody home.
I know. I knew Rona, yes, and she was very much part of the church when I started coming. She would. She organised the Sunday school, although when I actually came, she had stopped teaching, but she was very instrumental in running the choir and singing herself. And there were a lot of women in this who used to come to this small area who had really lovely voices, and Rona trained them for Christmas concerts and things like that, yes. She also ran a girls' club at her unit one night during the week, and the girls really loved coming to that. They used to make things sometimes and do cooking and handcraft and things like that, which was probably very important to them, because there was perhaps no other clubs and things for girls in the area, so that was very important. Well, I came to this. I was born in York. I brought up in the York Methodist Sunday School. Knew all, and then we shifted down to Vic Park. And then when I got married, we lived in Wembley. And then when we built a house up here in 1978, we shifted up here. But I didn't start coming to church probably until 1980. And I had our second son baptised here in the Uniting Church. It was the Uniting Church by then, because it had changed from the Methodist Church in 1975, I think. And so I had my second son baptised here as well as the third one. My mother attended at this congregation as well, because she lived in the area, and she coerced me into Sunday school teaching, and within a very short time I was made superintendent of the Sunday school, not because of any wonderful Sunday school teaching, just because I was there and I was coerced into the job. But anyway, the children all came into the church initially, and they were talked to by the minister, and after their children's story and a hymn or two, they went out, and we utilised that area that Roy also talked about, go round the back here and down, and there was an area which had barbecues and cooking facilities and sinks and things, and we used that as our Sunday school, and one of the ladies, I think, used to take her group out somewhere else too, so that we weren't all crushed in together. There was a group of elders, and of which I was one, and Roy's wife, Christine, she was another one of the elders, and Christine and Roy, I felt, had kept this congregation going way longer than it would have if they hadn't been here. But this little church, when it in its heyday, had chairs, so that you could only just fit in, and if you came late, the children might have to sit down on the front step, because there was not room for them to be, all the chairs were used, and so they would sit on the floor, and then when it was time for them to go out. So that was in like 1980, 81, and then we had lots of members of the congregation and lots of talented people to play the piano, and there was a chap who came with a saxophone, Roy with his mandolin, and there was lovely music emanated from these four walls in those days.
But I came here most weekends to be with my uncle, who had a store, general store in Malcolm Street, and he had a horse and cart attached to that business, and I liked to deliver the orders for him with the horse and cart on Saturday mornings. And I was about, I was 13, I think, when I was doing that. So I went around all the streets here and into Sandhills at Triggs to deliver chaff to a Mr. Hall, who was a piano tuner. And I think I probably live pretty near now to where he was camped with his horse. Well, it was special just to come out to my uncle and family and be involved with the shop. I loved shops. I spent my time making ice blocks and tidying up all the shelves. So I was quite an asset to his business. Pay wasn't good though.
I lived here from the time I was 4, and I got married at 22. Then my husband at that time, his parents had the boarding house in James Street, and so and we were in the surf club. He was captain of the surf club. My father was secretary of the surf club. And but then when we got married, we went to Manjimup for 17 years. And then we came back, but we didn't come back to North Beach. We lived in Marmion. And so we went to a church closer to there. And it wasn't until I came here that I came back to this church. But I came home.